Good morning, everybody. I can't tell if it's on or not. I don't think it's on.
Hey!
No, it's okay. I
We're
got
starting.
Good morning. I don't know if you could hear me or not, but I'm just giving you the 1-minute warning.
I thought you were starting.
This morning's work session for the 23-24 budget, we do have a hard stop today at 11 o'clock, so we do want to be cognizant of the time that each office is taking, because we have, everybody has responsibilities at lunchtime, and then we got to pick up again this afternoon. So. Thank you all so much for being here. This is our first work session to develop the 23-24 budget. We've already received a presentation from our property appraiser on, thank you so much, David Johnson, on our taxable values and ad valorem revenues. Today we will hear from 4 of our constitutional officers, our court support agencies, and the Florida Department of Health. The morning session is scheduled until 11, and then we'll resume at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The tax collector unfortunately wasn't available to be a part of today's meeting schedule, so he is going to present at the June 20th work session. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our county manager, Darren Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, commissioners, and guests. I would like to thank our county staff and the staff of our constitutional officers and court support departments for being here today and their hard work and what they've done up to this point. As you all know, we are still in the process of finalizing our fiscal year 24 budget recommendations, which will be delivered to the board in late June. And with that being said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our Chief Judge to start the day off.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I also wanted to thank everyone in the staff, and especially Tim Jex, who helped us with our budget in regards to everything that we are needing today. I wanted to start off essentially just to let you all know that we have $6.8 million that we get for our budget from the courts, and 11.2% of that is from Seminole County. And just to let you know, we are the lowest that we receive from our county in Central Florida, and I believe in the state, based on my research. So it's not that we ask a lot of funds from the courts in Seminole County to be provided to us. So I hope that you keep that in mind when we're also talking about the monies that we're asking for here today. Now, essentially what we are asking, just to let you know, so this is the county funded budget. Essentially, what we have is as you can see, the proposed budget is $101,057,020. Although the variance is $294,018, some of that, just to go through everything on what that entails for you to give you a better explanation, is aspects that were previously within the budget that essentially are moving forward. For instance, on personnel services, although that is $192,825, $65,007 is for COLA for the current employees. So there are county employees that we have through the court system, and $65,000 of that is for that portion of the budget to move forward with those employees, and of course being asked their cost of living expenses. We also had previously, which is in the operating expenditures and the capital outlay, you all had provided $75,000 in the past to increase the technology and actually have it even come up to somewhat of speed in the juvenile courthouse. It is probably 30 years behind right now. And it is not sufficient in cameras, it's not sufficient in technology with Zoom, for virtual hearings and things of that nature. And we did previously have it in the $75,000 in the budget, and unfortunately, based upon some delays with attempting to get certain electronics and equipment and also personnel. We were unable to use it in time, so we are re-asking essentially for that $75,000, but it was previously already awarded by the county. So now going back to the $192,825 for personnel services, we are requesting a civil magistrate. Essentially, for those of you who may not know regarding the court system, currently we have in our civil family division 4,837 cases as of Friday. That is 5,725 civil cases as of Friday, which is a total of 10,562 cases within that division, which is approximately 2,600 for each judge in the civil family division. Now, average through the state, it's 1,000 to 1,500 with those divisions. So we are above average right now, especially also if I'm sure everyone paid attention to the fact that the governor signed a bill recently in which that bill allowed throughout the state 80,000 plus cases in the state of Florida to be filed within a week. Because what happened was the governor unprecedentedly had allowed also for those cases or for that bill to go into effect immediately at the time he signed it at 11:54 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, not providing necessarily a time for the anticipation for the litigation like normally occurs on either July 1st, October 1st, or January 1st of the next year. So there was a great influx of cases as well. And because of that, we had a great deal of civil cases that were provided and filed within a week. And essentially, that increased the civil divisions in each division by approximately 300 each, 300 to 400 each in just that week. We've still also had cases that were filed before that week as well in anticipation, but that was just that week. And based upon those circumstances with the civil family division, we would be asking for a magistrate to at least help. The state provides family magistrates. So we do have 2 family magistrates, but we do not have a civil magistrate in any manner. And it's essentially $88,000 of that is the salary. The remaining portion is the requirement of benefits, which of course everyone knows seems to be rising, unfortunately, but is a great chunk of that expense. $88,150 to be exact is what the salary would be, and $39,668 would be the benefits. I will say we were also asking, just to let you know, for a chief technology officer and for the salary for that chief technology officer, but we managed to obtain, we do have that, the state funding that salary. So also now moving to the operating expenditures, what we are asking to be in a more competitive market because we are still looking for a chief technology officer. We have been looking now since February and essentially only had 2 interviews in that time frame. And unfortunately, each of them then, when we did offer each the position, and unfortunately had other offers or other circumstances and did not go in that direction. So what we are asking, instead of the full amount, which we did obtain some from the state, is a $20,000 supplement to that salary so we could be more competitive in the market. Because in the government market, and what the state awards, unfortunately, is not competitive in the local market, especially with technology, in order to be able to obtain the employees and also keep those employees. So part of that $65,095 is the increase or supplement for that salary is what we're asking for. Also, what we are asking for within there is $6,193 in licensing costs. It's just to maintain some of the licensing, an increase in software licensing that we already have. So that, again, is something that we already have, but just asking as far as based upon the increase in software licensing costs to be able to provide for that. The other remaining portion, which is $38,902, is from the operating expenditures, is what I had previously mentioned about the $75,000 cost. We're taking $38,902 from the operating expenditures. And then when you look down to the capital outlay of the $36,098, that is where you get the $75,000 that was previously indicated for the juvenile courthouse for the technology. And that's where we get our total of the $194,018. I can say the two factors of what we previously had, it's essentially, if you're really looking at the budget, the two new things that we are asking for is the $20,000 supplement and the magistrate, which is the $127,000 with the benefits and salary. I'm, at this point, if there are any questions, the next slide would have been the judicial staffing, which outlines what we get from the state and the amount of employees and current FTEs we have, which we have between this circuit, 197.25 total FTEs. So we would just be asking for one more from the county. There are 6 currently funded from the county that are actually funded from the county. The other 5 are technically grant funded. Those are drug court employees, so they're actually funded by grants. They're not, but they're funded where the county manages that money through the county. So essentially what we're asking for is instead of 6 FTEs, we're asking for 7 at this point. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain any questions at this time.
All right, Commissioners. Commissioner Hart?
So let's just explore the 10,000 cases. Those are cases that have built up over time in the circuit court system?
When you say built up over time, essentially, we had an influx on the cases for civil just more recently within the last, we had an increase both in February, March, and April. But like I said, we had just an increase in filings in 1 week based upon, so it wasn't necessarily over time for the civil portion of the cases. The family cases, actually, they're pretty much being maintained. There are increased filings also over the last year, about 50 to 100 a month. So, and I can tell you, because I just recently looked at the numbers, for instance, from when I became chief judge, because we're going to take those cases, because I right now am only handling the civil division, but as of July 1st, it would be a civil family division again, and looked at all the family cases on what would be possibly transferred back from what was previously, as of July 1st, an open case. In my division, there were 1,500, a little over 1,500 family cases that were open as of July 1st. Of those cases from July 1st of 2021, only 500 are still open in the other 3 divisions, because we looked at what we would be transferring back. So essentially, those cases are moving. They are closing the cases. It's just we have had, because of COVID, we've also noticed an influx and an increase. There are a lot more people getting divorced since, and that's just the way to say it.
I get that.
So, seriously, there is an influx and an increase since COVID on our family filings. So it's not cases, to answer your question, no, it's not necessarily cases that have remained around.
I think the piece that threw me off is that the surrounding area maintains a caseload of around 1,500, the increase in the number.
They have more judges, and unfortunately, that's part of the issue.
So we'll make sure that we get the whole question. We're going to let each
I
commissioner
apologize.
take their time to ask the whole question, and then we'll
I
hear the whole
apologize.
Well, and I was attempting to get you there. So the judicial count is a little bit different. Is it anticipated that this magistrate position is coming in to clean out the caseload and then goes away? Is this a short-term ask, or is this a perpetual, we're now at 7, and all of the costs go up from there?
Well, I can tell you for my personal belief, since I've been chief, is that we need another judge in Seminole County. But the way the system works, and that's a whole nother another issue, for the way they do workload studies, calculate their formula to determine what the certification is for judges in each circuit. We are going to have another workload study that will be conducted in September of this year. So I'm hoping that if everything's accurately accounted for, the formula is, hopefully that's another thing that we are also, as I can say, as chief judge, part of the issues I'm on that committee lobbying for as well is adjusting the calculation. But that then would allow for certification for new judges in each circuit. But I can tell you the need's definitely there now for that. The Civil Family Division, though, has been overloaded, I think, for the busiest division of our divisions for a while. But at the very least, we definitely would need it for the year to at least aid in the influx of even civil cases that we have had. And because the other issue is, prior to this, the other thing that happened during COVID, which a lot of people aren't aware necessarily, is there was a new case management system that was put in, or case management order put into play by the Supreme Court. It used to be that cases could be continued regularly. They could go to trial and whenever 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 years down the road, depending on the cases, especially the more complex and bigger cases. Our Supreme Court, in their infinite wisdom, to attempt to streamline cases and make them all resolve much quicker, ended up following what is the federal court system in some manner. The federal court system, when you begin a case, you have to choose if it's going to be resolved on track 1 in 1 year, track 2 in 2 years, or track 3 in 3 years. Our Supreme Court chose the numbers of 1 year, 18 months, and 2 years, even though in federal court, the judges have a case of 300 caseload for each of them, and they have 4 clerks to 1 judge as far as staff attorneys or clerks. And they also have a magistrate assigned for each judge, and also cases by order are resolved without hearing. The issue that the courts have is that we are now being mandated by the Supreme Court to resolve these cases in half, some third of the time, depending, but essentially 18 months to 2 years for the majority of cases, and do not have the same resources, considering that we have caseloads that are larger, everyone from 1,500 to 2,500 cases, to the point of also having 1 staff attorney per 4 judges, and only a family magistrate, which is 2 family magistrates per 4 judges. So the caseload and the workload we have does not allow us with the resources to try and resolve it. And so that's another reason that I'm asking for it, because we have this mandate. So it's something that most likely probably could be requested in the future, because again, we're being required without the resources to try and resolve these cases earlier.
And just to make sure, in that conversation, we weren't mixing apples and oranges between the division that you're asking for the magistrate to sit for versus...
It will be helping all divisions. It's not going to be it just like our family divisions now.
So the magistrate will be assigned across the board?
Yes. So what we'd like is a civil magistrate. So the way our family magistrates work is it's a referral, essentially. A case comes and you can refer matters to the family magistrate. The family magistrate then would get assigned randomly based upon the referral order. And so the idea is then the civil magistrate can get referred cases, and it would be coming from each division in order to be able to help on those cases that maybe would need some help with some time in getting them to hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Delary?
Thank you. Not sure if it's for the judge or our staff, but how are we doing with the technology fund and the collections and the expenditures of it? Can someone discuss that with us, please?
Are you talking about Article 5? Is that what you're asking about? Well, so that's an interesting thing, because I have looked into that more as far as the circumstances. And essentially, Article 5 is to be funded through Article 5 funding and state funding, and then otherwise it's supplemented by the counties, if their county's general fund, if it's inadequate. It's to be through all the constitutional officers, as far as the clerk, the state attorney, the PD, and the courts. Because I do know and have heard that our clerk of court will be asking for it to essentially be coming through from the general fund in the county rather than going through the recording fees portion. And technically by statute, it seems that's the way it's to work. I believe we're the only county who, in the state, from looking into it, that does not supplement it or fund it through the general fund if there's any inadequacies. But otherwise, what it would also allow is those recording fees that are being used to then, if there's any excess, it would go back to the county's general fund anyways. The one reason for the Article 5 funding is it's documented through the state, and we have to report our Article 5 funding to the state and any inadequacies in the Article 5 funding. And if there are inadequacies, then the state we can petition for to provide more Article 5 funding. But if it's not documented accordingly, then it makes it difficult to ask the state for more money because all we're doing is having then this public defender, the state attorney, and the courts, not also the Article 5 funding from the clerks. Personally, we could always use money in technology as far as the courts are concerned. That's my understanding too. In talking with the public defender, they'll be providing their monies back to the county is what I was informed. And we could always use that because the courts are what improve the courtrooms and all the technology in the courtrooms. We don't get that from the state attorney, and we don't get that from the PD, even though they use a lot of our court technology. So we have to fund one courtroom at a time and have been funding only one courtroom at a time in order to increase the technology over the last five years. So over the last 5 years, we've been doing one courtroom at a time because we can't afford to do more than one courtroom because technology is so expensive. So if you're asking me how our budget is, we could always use more.
Question I'm trying to ask is, how much are we receiving in Article 5? I realize that's what it was called. How much are we spending, and what is the need?
I would refer that to Tim because I honestly didn't look into the specifics of that number.
In your, in your presentation on slide 147, there is a snapshot of the Article 5 revenues.
What page is that again, Tim?
Page 147.
$599,696 is our total Article 5 budget right now for the courts. And that includes our personnel services.
So Tim, with all the money, you're going back to 2017, correct, on this slide?
That's correct.
And you show us how much money we've collected since 2017. How much have we spent since 2017? What are the reserves at?
There are no reserves in the fund. So typically, we have not needed to do a general fund supplement. You can see in fiscal 19 and in fiscal 22, we did have to do relatively small supplements. This year, the revenues are falling below the budget. We're estimating $460,000, which we think is a pretty good estimate, and we'll probably need to supplement $670,000 in order to meet the existing expenditures for the public defender, state attorney, and judicial. Next year, if we include the clerk's additional request, the budgeted transfer from the general fund to the Article 5 fund would be $1.8 million, and that does depend on where those revenues come in. You can see we had been around $750,000 or so in revenues, and there's a lot of factors that drive that revenue. So right now we have a $500,000 estimate. If that revenue came in higher, then the subsidy from the general fund would be lower.
So what the judge just told us, we could petition for more funding. Where are we with the petitioning?
Well, it would have to be documented first. So that's part of the issue is the clerk's, the clerk's Article 5 funding has not been recorded within the state of Florida at all. So essentially, because Mary Ann chose for the county not to participate in it, so they would not necessarily have the control or the idea of what she's spending and how she's spending at the time that she did it on the recording fees. The other thing I can tell you is, everybody knows, the mortgages in the state of Florida, people are coming in and paying cash. So they're buying cash houses, or paying cash for housing at this time. And so I will say that there has been a decrease throughout the state. The exact percentage I don't know, but I know being discussed at other meetings, there has been a decrease in recording fees throughout the state because we don't have mortgages being recorded because people are paying for cash. So those numbers are there, but essentially, there isn't any documentation to show a past need and a current need because it's never been reported to the state by the clerk because it has always been done since Mary Ann through the recording fees.
Yeah. And if I could add, in just meeting with the clerk, and the clerk could talk about it this afternoon, that's what he is trying to do, is right-size it to show where the Article 5 expenditures are being, because he is telling me they have been supplementing it through the recording fees for years, and that they need to document it. So we'll show you that, he'll show you that this afternoon as well.
So I had Commissioner Zembauer and then Commissioner Dolly, was that your last question?
For the moment, it is.
Okay, we will come back around. So we've got Zembauer, Herr,
Thank you.
Constantine.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief Judge, for being here. The Article 5 funds is something that I've been looking at. The county manager is aware of that. I've been digging into it for quite some time, and quite frankly, it's an issue. It's a problem that needs to be addressed. I've spoke to the clerk about it. To your knowledge, has there been any petition to the state for increased Article 5 that you're aware of at all?
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
All right.
And the issue, like I said, is also, I don't think our circuit's fully, or our county has fully documented it, so.
Right.
But it's also, at this point, the last couple years, is my understanding, and Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the last few years since COVID has been when there's more supplement from the general fund. Prior to that, I don't think we necessarily had to dip in the same manner. So it's really been something that's just arrived over the last few years.
So that would seem to convey that we've been pretty lucky because we had the fees coming in that were offsetting those expenses, albeit we were not documenting our Article 5 expenses that would prove a case for increased funding from the state.
Well, for the PD, the courts, and the state attorney, we've been receiving the Article 5 funding, and that was documented. It's the clerk's Article 5 that was not. And again, just the increase, because prior to COVID, we didn't have that. Now, one of the things in technology, if you look at the Article 5 bill, it talks about technology, but this was written 20-something years ago, prior to COVID, when you weren't anticipating virtual hearings in a courtroom, and to make sure the technology is appropriate in the courtroom. So the amount of Article 5 funding has increased in the last few years, and my belief, of course, is because of COVID. And as a result of that, the last few years, we're having to supplement from the general fund, where we never had to do that before because we didn't have the technology or require the technology in the courtroom. So that Article 5 funding it gears towards part of that is towards technology. And so that's part of the issue.
Okay, thank you. And this is for staff, and this is probably for our council. If you could, I think it would be helpful to get a briefing on Florida Statutes 29008, which is that speaks to the county's responsibility of funding the judicial system, so that we all have a good understanding of what we are ultimately responsible for, as well as we will continue to work on this Article 5 issue, which is popping up in a couple different areas, which we haven't shared completely because we don't have all the data, but hopefully we will be able to do that soon. Thank
Sure,
you.
Commissioner.
Yes, Commissioner Herr.
So I think A correction for the record. I think it's the Article 5 expenditures on technology have increased. The revenue has clearly
Yeah.
decreased. So it's not the funding that's increased. The source of the funding has changed. We continue to talk about this, and certainly in my briefing with the clerk, the question was asked a few times about the revenue source and the composure of that fund. And I do continue to get the answer of, there are several things that go into it. We really need the detail on that. So we need a detailed outline of what goes into it, what goes out of it, and then the definitions of what should be going out of it and what the expectation is so that we can get to the bottom of the situation.
And thank you, Chairman. You're correct. I misspoke when we were saying
Chairman,
fund.
Vice
I'm
Chair,
sorry,
though.
Vice Chairman.
But thank you.
Sorry.
When I grow up someday.
I misspoke, though, when I said as far as the funding rather than the revenue. Thank you.
Commissioner
Expenditures.
Thank you. Speaking of the Chief Technology Officer that you mentioned before and the
Yes.
difficulty in trying to find one, the question that needs to be asked, I don't know our budget in IT yet, but I don't know whether we're asking for more or if we're beefing that up, but is there a possibility that we could coordinate that particular position and share maybe an additional position in that?
We can't because we got the money from the state, and so the way it works, for instance, we can have a supplement of monies to help pay, but we can't share a state employee with the county unless, the only manner they could is that they were a part-time state employee and then possibly a part-time county, but I'm not even sure we could do it that way. No, we
As I
can't.
recall, yeah, what you requested was an additional 20,000.
We did,
Is
so
that-
we
is that-
requested the supplement, but the supplement of 20,000 for the salary. But because we had that as a state-funded,
Okay.
full-time position is what we ended up getting, that we can't share it with the county.
Okay, thank you.
We can pay for it, but we
Yeah,
can
we
help
can
pay for it, but we can't
use
share it, yeah.
We can't use it.
That's funny
But
how
there
that
is a
works.
benefit when you say, and I'm sorry, there is a benefit that is received because that technology officer is the one that deals with our development, deals with as far as the technology in the courts, setting up the technology for the courtrooms. So it benefits the citizens of Seminole County in that sense when we are asking for that supplement. It's just to also maintain that competitive rate.
So, Commissioner Delarry, I'll come back to you in just a moment. You mentioned a workload study that was done. You said that you're about to do another one.
So,
So let me just,
Okay.
let me put a question mark at the end of it. So could we have a copy of the most recent workload study, and would you copy us on, no?
no. So
Okay.
the way it works, we don't even get a copy of it as judges. It goes through OSCA, it goes through the court system. The
Okay.
state court system is who organizes the workload study. The workload study is, so it's only been done a couple times. It was something that had started in the later 2000s, essentially. And it was established that based upon it's the workload of the judges, where each judge for a period of a month will have to document their workload, their time, every minute or hour that they're working or dealing with either judicial activities or I should say judicial workload and judicial activities. Because, for instance, attending events is a judicial activity that is part of your job, but it's not necessarily part of the workload. And then what is done is they then, through OSCA, gather that workload. There is a outside source that is used to provide this workload. So nobody receives an actual copy of, through the judges or otherwise, because there's also trade secret aspects, I guess, in how they come to a component of dealing with some of the results and the circumstances in the software. But the judges, even the chief judges, don't receive a result. The only thing that's done is there's then a calculation that's conducted as a result. That portion can possibly be provided. And that is something then that they use for the next 5 years. The last one was done in 2015, and we are delayed by 3 years because of COVID, because it was supposed to be done in 2020, and of course got postponed. So now it's 8 years later that we are doing it. And then the certification results I can give you as to what that formula comes up on whether we would be allowed another judge or not.
Okay. That would be awesome. If you could share whatever you're able to share, I think that would be helpful. I certainly know that by asking questions about workload and operations that could be perceived that I'm getting into your sandbox, and I don't mean to do that, but we sort of had this conversation about whether we needed a new courtroom as well. Please don't take this the wrong way, but I'm going there. So judges don't punch a clock. I get it. Very few people in the world that we live in today are punching clocks. But when we talk about workload, I would imagine if you have a number of, let's just say, 1,000 cases on your docket that you're working on, you can get through more of them if you work more during the day, if you put in more hours in a day. So how do we know, because judges do, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of plan their day out, determine, when they're taking vacation, when they're coming in, when they're going. How do we know that and I'm going with fear and trepidation, how do we know that the caseload and the workload is exceeding other areas because it's truly different or because we're working fewer hours?
Well, I can tell you right now, I'm in the Civil Family Division, and I can tell you all the judges in the Civil Family Division are working expediently and efficiently and very hard as far as getting cases done. We have 100 orders a day that are coming into our and I, as chief and drug court and otherwise, still have a ton. Some of them have a couple hundred a day that are coming through because these cases, based upon case management orders with the new case management system, trying to move cases in regards to final judgments plus trial orders, everything that's coming through, they're moving these cases along. It's just a lot more work based upon what's been put on through our Supreme Court. And I can tell you, I know Judge Stacy, Judge Brzezinski, and Judge Rudisil, they're conducting their hearings. As chief judge, part of mine is oversight. They're conducting hearings every day. We're doing emails. Sometimes we're getting emails, and I know I'm one of those individuals too, sending email at 11, 12 o'clock at night because you're still working on orders and things are being signed. But the one thing about our new case management system and the electronic system, we can sign anything at any time of day, yes, but part of the issue is normally we're doing the hearings, and unfortunately then you can't get to an order sometimes during the day because you're going through hearings throughout the day, and then you have your schedule at night. I personally haven't taken a vacation longer than a long weekend in 5 years. So I can tell you from my view, I believe they're working towards getting the work done because you can't, if you don't, then they would be even more overloaded than what already is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how much of what we're talking about in this budget is shared with Brevard? Any of it?
As far as the county aspect,
Well, the magistrate, I think I heard you said, is going to be across.
it's only for Seminole County.
Okay.
So our family magistrates are only for Seminole County. Each of them are assigned, our judges are assigned, and even the way we work with our judges, although other circuits rotate between counties and can travel, we do not do that unless we're helping out someone. But for the most part, and I as chief, I go back and forth from Brevard. But otherwise, every Seminole judge stays in Seminole, Brevard judge stays in Brevard, and the magistrates are each assigned the same way to a specific county.
Okay. Okay. I had a similar question as Commissioner Constantine about how we can leverage technology needs across our multiple organizations, because, of course, a lot of my conversation with the clerk was also about technology. And it seems like there might be opportunities to work together on some of those funds, not necessarily sharing employees, but certainly sharing technology, licensing fees. I'm not sure exactly how that all would work, but I would love to see if we can't look into where the opportunities are and where they aren't. So I don't know who in your department would be able to work with the county manager on that, but that would be helpful.
Normally, it would be our chief technology officer, so it will be Ivan until we get one. And otherwise, I know we've explored some of that in the past, and for some reason, for instance, I know we looked into cybersecurity insurance. We can't share our cybersecurity insurance with the county. So right now, we have no cybersecurity insurance. So things of that nature. And based upon the fact that it's a circuit versus the county, so we'd have to try and do it for the circuit, so therefore we can't share it with just one county. So there's different things and difficulties based upon the fact that we are a state circuit that some may prevent us on some of the technology issues, but I would gladly share whatever we could with the county.
That'd be great.
And you guys provide the network right now, so you pay for the network basically that we use, and you also have the phone system that we use, so there's costs there that are.
Yes. And I just heard recently from the clerk that he doesn't like our phone system anymore. So it took us so long to get it updated and improved, and I mean, that was like a dinosaur we hauled out of the building, and now we don't like it anymore. So anyway, Commissioner Delary and then Commissioner Zembauer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I just want to reiterate that we've always had a great working relationship with the court system. So, Judge, I appreciate your hard work and your staff. My question on technology or Article 5 is just for our better understanding, to make sure that we're spending money expeditiously, and to make sure that when we do spend that money, we're only spending it once, so that whoever is using it is fully on board on what we're spending the dollars for, so that we're not going to have to go back in whatever year it is, because it's not really compatible, or it's not something that meets your needs. When it comes to the magistrate, you've always made, the group has always made good decisions on how we can work together. I don't see a reason why we can't continue doing that. I think the magistrate dollars are very reasonable, and I look forward to all the input that our staff have been giving us on the Article 5 on how that money is collected and what it can be spent for, and hear your input on what we're trying to do with it.
Thank you. Understood. And like I stated, is I also had to research the issue more when I became informed of what was going on. So I looked into it myself as much as I could in regards to the Article 5 funding issue. And it should be shared through all, or just at least reported.
Other questions? We're good? All right. I think if we have anything else, our team will certainly follow up if we need some clarification. We thank you so much for being here.
And I would like to thank the commission for having me here and for always working with the courts so well. We really do appreciate the collaborative relationship, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Gray. This is just first time I met him as well. So, but thank you all for everything you do, and thank you, Madam Chairman, for having me.
Thank you.
We appreciate you all. Mr. Johnson. We had a citizen email in last week after our tourism development work session, noting that they could not read in this format the name tags that were underneath each person as they were speaking. And I see now Mr. Johnson's just says reserved for staff, so that wouldn't help at all anyway.
It works out great.
So if you would just introduce yourself and who you are.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm David Johnson, your Seminole County property appraiser, and as the chairman alluded to when we got started, we have been going down this journey for a few months now with revenue estimates and all that good stuff. So here we are today to talk about the office's specific budget. And again, I say this every time we get together, but your staff is wonderful. Tim is a jewel, and we appreciate working with him, and it's very professional relationship. So thank you very much. So let's talk about the budget for the property appraiser's office and the calendar that we run through. Statutorily, everything that we do for my budget, and not speak for the tax collector, but the tax collector and the property appraiser's budgets are carved out in the state statutes, unlike my other constitutional officers, and they have very specific timeframes associated with them. The property appraiser's budget is due to the Department of Revenue and to you by June 1st. Obviously, we are ahead of that process, and certainly glad to do that. By July 15th, the Department of Revenue has to give an approval back to the office and to you as the Board of County Commissioners that they have reviewed the budget and that they are comfortable with the information that's in there, or they would have us go back and make adjustments. And then final budget approval is August 15th. You have a moment between July 15th and August 15th to say if you've got any concerns back to the Department of Revenue, but the final budget approval with the Department of Revenue is August 15th. And again, that's outlined in 195.087 of the Florida statutes. The tax collector's budget is due to the Department of Revenue by August 1st, so they do all 67 property appraisers between June 1 and July 15th, and then the tax collectors come on board after that. So that's the reasoning for the timing that's there. So here are the scenarios that are outlined in our budget request to you for 2024 fiscal year. It's about a 6.7% increase in overall funding, and that is based on a 5% salary increase, 4% increase in insurance rates, increase in Florida retirement system rates, which we're all, as public employers, are having to absorb. And then our full-time equivalents remain at 48 positions. That has not changed. Because of the way again, this goes back statutorily, most of my budget, about 98% of it, is funded by you as the Board of County Commissioners and the 3 funds that you control. And this is how much money comes out of each one of those 3 funds to fund the budget. Obviously, the biggest piece of that is the general fund at $6.34 million, the fire fund at $941,000, and of course the transportation fund about $27,000. So you'll get 3 letters, Madam Chairman, that says this is how much for each one of those funds to pay. Again, it's governmental accounting, and we want to make sure everything, all the i's are dotted and all the t's are crossed there. This is just the budget submission that we give to the Department of Revenue for them to start that process, and showing that we did follow 195.087. And then there's a number of schedules that follow that budget request. I'm just not out there asking for money without any kind of documentation. And there's a number of schedules that are associated with the budget request to the Department of Revenue. Certainly, as the Board of County Commissioners are also able to access that and review those at any level. And you can see what that is. Schedule 1 is the salaries. Schedule 1A is all the personnel services, insurance, FRS. Again, we break it out like you would traditionally see between salaries, personnel services, capital outlay, et cetera. And then there's justification worksheets for any changes in positions and travel, et cetera. This gives you this is a synopsis of what each one of those categories looks like, and again, what we're submitting to the Department of Revenue for review, and certainly your staff is also getting a copy of this. Organizational chart, pretty traditional governmental organizational chart. We have to also submit this with our budget request so that the Department of Revenue knows that we are funding actual folks doing an actual job. And again, that's 48 positions as outlined for fiscal year 24. Whoops. So we always like to brag, why not? This is kind of where we are as a per capita, Seminole County budget per capita. We're at about $14.34 per person per population here in Seminole County. That is the 7th lowest of the 67 counties, even though we're the 13th largest county. And again, we always like to compare, because why not? That's what we do in our world. We show up very favorably. Obviously, Lake County comes in at $10. I can't speak to Lake County, but we're very favorable with all of our surrounding counties that are there. Our neighbors across the river in Volusia, not to throw any disparaging remarks, but they're almost twice as much as we are per capita. I'm not sure. I have enough to worry about here in Seminole County. I can't run the other 66 other property appraisers' offices, but we're very proud of that number. And we always throw Sarasota in there. I'm not sure why we always throw Sarasota in, other than it's a beautiful place, other than and our demographics are very similar. But we
Because they're always higher, that's why you put it in there.
Whenever we do studies in the county, we always bring in Sarasota, and it's like I said, it's a beautiful place.
Well, I
and,
think their population
they have
demographics are very similar.
Similar demographics,
Seminole.
yeah, exactly.
But surprisingly, they're only about two-thirds.
This is another chart since 2010 that we like to kind of talk about, the growth of the tax roll versus our employee count. You can see that employee count has actually decreased in that time frame, while obviously the tax roll has grown exponentially. And again, kind of going back to the conversation that you just had with the courts, we have always leveraged technology in the office. We think that's very, very important, and it certainly helps us to do the job much more efficiently. And my philosophy in the office is also, it's more expensive to catch up than to stay up, okay, as far as, especially with technology. So that's where we've made our investments over the years, and thanks to your investments, we think that we deliver a pretty good product. So this is, we've talked about this before. This gives you some idea about what the taxable values are doing between your three funds that you control. The one thing, breaking news, that it's not breaking news to Tim, but to you maybe. If you remember a few weeks ago when we did the projection, we were saying 9.5% basically growth. We're now plugging in 10. It's probably going to be a little bit north of 10, not much north of 10, but Tim's been using 10 over the last couple of weeks also, percent growth over 23. So, and again, it'll be a little bit north of that, but we will finalize those numbers for you next week. We will officially notify you of those numbers next week. Website, we're very proud of, and what the main thing I want to highlight on this is a few years ago, Madam Chairman, you and the board advocated for us to have our budgets out there, being more transparent. We thought that was a wonderful idea. So we do, in fact, put the budgets, the audits, the quarterly reports out there on the website, and it's prominently displayed on the homepage. And that's what it kind of looks like. You can see so anybody that's interested and has nothing else to do and have trouble sleeping at night, they're welcome to go on there and take a look. A couple things that we've done over the last couple of years, or last year, we talked about the initiative of street-level imagery. That project is now completed. We have utilizing that in the office, and then we have also allowed for your departments to also have access to that imagery. It's made a huge difference from a public safety perspective and also from our being able to do the job more efficiently. That project is completed. We did the whole county with the contractor. And now what we do is on a yearly basis, we do a fourth of the county basically geographically. So every 4 years, there's new imagery that's sitting out there. And so we do have a contractor currently on the streets, basically northwest, central part of the county, updating that imagery. And of course, when the appraisers go out and pick up new construction, they are taking photos at that time and adding it to the database. So it's on the website, and again, public safety has access to all of those imagery. A new initiative that we are starting this year, and it's just something that it's just time. We've had to do this. We've had a homestead fraud unit in the office for a number of years, but we also are now employing a contractor to help us with that. Mainly this is due to short-term rentals. And certainly your home is your castle. You have the right to utilize your home within the parameters of the law. But what we are concerned about is the homestead piece of it. If you're going to run your home as a business, i.e. rent it out, then do you get to qualify for a homestead exemption on the whole thing or a portion of it? And so there's a new Supreme Court decision out of the state of Florida a couple weeks ago that says, in fact, if you start renting your home out and utilizing it as a business on a consistent basis, that portion of the home should not get the benefit of the homestead exemption. The $50,000 homestead exemption is swell, and that certainly saves $600 or $700 a year in property taxes. But the other thing that happens in this county is this. It also creates the cap on how much your assessment can go up to the lesser of 3% or the consumer price index. In this county, Seminole County, The average difference between, or Save Our Homes savings is $150,000. So you take the $150,000 plus the $50,000 homestead exemption, that's $3,000 in property taxes on average that someone is not paying, and that's fine. That's what the law says, and the person that benefits from that should in fact get that benefit. We just do not want folks who are not entitled to that benefit receiving that benefit. So it's real money. So the $3,000, like I said, $3,000 in property taxes sometimes can have folks make some decisions that they normally wouldn't. Okay. So anyway, I will tell you, it's handfuls of current investigations that we have. It's not hundreds, it's not thousands. Thankfully, we do not, as I've told you before, we don't have, this is a county where people come to live, and they're, the primary residence. There's not a lot of vacation homes. We have no timeshares. Not a lot of secondary homes, so that makes the job a little bit easier. But we certainly are taking care of those situations that we think we need to look into. Again, there's about 30-some active investigations going on. Once that information comes back to us from the contract, then we just start working it through in the office, because certainly there's a huge due process that's afforded to the property owners, as well should be. And we follow through on that. So again, we don't think it's a huge problem. It's just something we stay on top of. And that's our only new initiative for 24. And with that, I'm available for whatever questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions for the property appraiser?
I have one
Okay,
of
sure.
Tim. Thank you for the 10% increase. Tim, what is the
That's the market that does that, yeah.
No, I understand, but thank you for the change. Tim, what is, remind us all, what is the percentage of ad valorem in our entire budget?
So in the general fund, the fiscal '24 ad valorem estimate is $230 million, updated with David's newest projections. The total revenue is approximately $300 million, so it makes up a large percentage of our general fund.
230 to 300 million?
And I will mention that every 1% of growth equals about $2 million, so the extra 0.5% would be another $1 million.
And of the 230 million, 300 million, I'm trying to, 300 million total in general revenue. I just had a senior moment. I can't remember what the next question.
I'll bail you out for a minute.
Okay.
How about that? I just wanted to say thank you. If anybody could teach a doctorate level course on how to do budgeting and how to manage expenses, it's you, and we appreciate you
Well,
for
thank you
that.
very much, appreciate that. I will say also that Tim and I are going to have a celebration, you're going to be invited to it. You are approaching a $50 billion tax roll from a taxable value. So for every mill that you levy, you would generate $50 million in additional ad valorem revenue. And that's a nice, easy number to work with. We had 40, now we're almost up to 50. So we'll invite you to the party once we hit to 50.
So we can do the math better, and has it come back to you, Constantine? There we go.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Because I was so impressed with his budget, as always. None of the other revenues have increased significantly, have they?
No.
Or some of them have even decreased, correct?
That's correct.
So the only one that's really increased in this one is the ad valorem, which is 230 of the 300 million.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, and we're going to give, at the June 20th budget work session, we're going to give you a full revenue report on that as well.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson? Of course, we know how to find you
Absolutely,
if we need
just
you.
down the hall.
That's right.
Very
Thank you
good.
so much. We
Thank
appreciate you
Appreciate it.
being
Have
here
a
and
good rest of the day.
answering all those very hard questions.
Thank you very much,
We
appreciate it.
appreciate your
Thank
team
you.
as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Up next is the sheriff, Sheriff Dennis Lima and his team making their way forward.
Well, good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, colleagues. Great seeing you guys.
Morning.
Before you get started, Sheriff, I'm going to ask both of you to just introduce yourselves and your position so that SGTV has that
Yep.
on the...
Thank you so much. Dennis Lima, the Sheriff of Seminole County, 10th Sheriff of Seminole County. I'm here with Lisa Spriggs, our Chief of Administrative Services, and then in the audience we have also Under Sheriff Lou Tamio, who's the second in command. We have Chief of Staff Brian Byer, and we have Chief of Youth and Family Services Sharon Bryan. That's in the back. So we're going to go through the first slide, which is an amendment to our original request. And as we've heard, kind of a recurring theme, that's something that you're very, very aware of. Senate Bill 7024 had an impact on us. We were anticipating an 8% increase in our blended contribution rate for the FRS, which ended up being actually a 16.5% increase, and that effects on our budget was about $1.7 million. So the amendment that we had from 7% to 8% reflects a $1.5 million increase based upon the Senate passing of that effort 7024. So that first narrative kind of just explains that. The second is kind of a breakdown of our overall request. Some of the things that I'll mention and highlight, starting with child protective investigations. All the commissioners are aware that there's been an effort across the state of Florida to shift back to a holistic model of child protective investigations across the state. Seminole County for the past 25 years has been one of 7 counties to provide exclusive responsibility of abuse, neglect, and abandonment of children. And we're incredibly proud that the state has really adopted our model of service across the state of Florida. Part of our ask with this budget is to transition to a program that makes sense for us, which means keeping as close to possible resembling the services that we provide, the collateral responses, both with the unincorporated areas of Seminole County as well as the city of. You have been offsetting the child protective investigative budget in the neighborhood of about $750,000 per year. We're asking to shift to a $500,000 contribution to keep 8 positions to allow us to have unique characteristics of wraparound services. Those 8 positions would provide an opportunity to connect the dots between Seminole County Public Schools, the Guardian Ad Litem program, and other family wraparound services. So that child protective investigations, if we can do it in that manner, none of the services provided to our citizens would be compromised. The people simply would receive a paycheck from the state versus the sheriff's office, but they will continue to be co-located in our building. They'll continue to work with our investigators. They'll have access to our unique cafe system, and all of the police officers and deputy sheriffs will collaterally respond to every call for service within our community. That is a 50-50 funding split between us and DCF, a unique characteristic with Secretary Harris, and one that does not exist in any other county across the state of Florida. So again, to summarize that, that's a $500,000 ask for 8 positions to maintain our wraparound services. Continuing with that narrative, substance use, and this is something that all of us here in Seminole County have been incredibly mindful of and plugged in on. And the work that we collectively do together is second to none. We are quite literally shaping Florida's law year after year when it comes to handling people who are substance use dependent. Your generosity and partnership with organizations like Advent Health, our organization, other stakeholder organizations have really helped guide people down the path of recovery, and at the same time holding the drug dealers accountable for victimization of the most vulnerable of our population. I think that we're up to probably 30 to 35 prosecutions for first-degree murder, more than any other county in the state of Florida for drug dealers. and at the same time, one of the few correctional facilities in the country to provide all 3 forms of FDA-approved medical-based treatment therapy combined with cognitive therapy on the inside of our correctional facility. And then, of course, in a very bipartisan type of way, our Hope and Healing Center that is run by Advent Health, supported by our Board of County Commissioners and our county staff in the Sheriff's Office, continues to grow. But let me just kind of give some updated numbers on this chart that says Seminole County overdoses. As of 2 days ago, the year-to-date overdoses in Seminole County, non-fatal overdoses is 201. Fatal overdoses in Seminole County year-to-date is 38. And then that totals out to 239. It's about a 10% increase year-to-date. And you can see those numbers as they continue to climb as we see the expiration of Title 42 at the border. We see unprecedented drugs coming into our streets and communities, not unique to Seminole County, but across the country. The fight is real, and the fight continues there. In addition to that, as you know, and we'll talk about a little bit more, you allocated a significant amount of resources and money to expand this partnership with Advent Health. I think that the county was just shy of $7 million of the $9 million for a expanded mental health effort that we're incredibly excited about. But to shape kind of the depth of that problem, in 2022 we had 2,828 involuntary admissions under the Baker Act. In 2021 that increased to 3,336. And then in 2022 it was 3,195. And we're at 1,127 year-to-date. What is incredibly important is the most recent stats show that 1 out of every 3 children have seriously contemplated suicide in the last 2 years. And we've been talking about the unintended consequences of COVID and sheltering in place and increased victimization while the numbers of reported victimizations decreased. That Baker Act represents a 24% Youth Baker Act in 2020, 28% Youth Baker Act in 2021, 25% Youth Baker Act in 2022, and year-to-date in 2023, we're tracking a 30% increase in children being Baker Acted. So that's pretty significant. And then, of course, when we talk about the presence of fentanyl, the most recent research, we always talked about fentanyl and the presence of fentanyl and drugs on the streets. Well, the narrative has shifted. One time we had a problem with overprescribing in Big Pharma, and you have been involved in the multiple district lawsuits, and we know that we had the state settlement lawsuits and all of this stuff. But the most recent stats show that 1 out of every 6 pills on the streets contain a lethal dose of fentanyl, which means if somebody takes a pill that is not handed to them by their pharmacist, there's a 1 in 6 chance that they will take it and die. And public safety professionals, both fire and police in Seminole County, still deploy the life-saving drug naloxone, or an opioid antagonist, approximately 800 times per year. Or another way to put that, we bring about 800 people in Seminole County back to life with the use of medicine every single year. That number continues to grow. I will say that the most recent legislative effort that we've had actually increases the penalty, makes it easier to charge people with murder, that when they're a drug dealer and they give deadly doses of drugs, or they poison somebody with the use of fentanyl. And most impressively, and will have an effect on our operation, this legislative session we were able to get across the finish line and waiting for the governor's signature, an increased penalty for all of those people that we revived with naloxone. So quite literally, drug dealers have been getting away with murder. If they've dealt drugs, we've revived them with an opioid antagonist, they were saved from prosecution. This new law would allow us to charge a second-degree felony culpable negligence for every person that is revived with the use of Narcan, and we can track that back. So again, we should be all collectively incredibly proud of that, and that effort, legislative effort, which was carried by Senator Broder and State Representative Rachel Plakin, was generated out of the Sheriff's Office and our county combined initiatives. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The facility Again, $9 million, $6.8 million of that was given to us from the county. The remaining was shared from the municipalities, is largely going to the 15,100 square foot building that will be located in Altamont Springs. This is the expanded effort. This will initially house 15 male, 12 female, with the opportunity for expanded growth of 30 male and 24 female at that location directly across from Advent Health on 436 in Altamont Springs. And again, the ARPA funds went into kind of moving in that direction, and all of you should be commended for putting that much effort and interest in mental health and the co-occurring issues that go along with substance use disorder. Recruitment and retention is going to be another big ask. Our salary and our budget plans for a 5% adjustment across the board and a 3% adjustment to the base salary pay. And I've said year after year, as we've had the opportunity to present, we're realistic and where we want to be with market value. We don't just compare ourselves to the highest agencies within the region. We understand that there's a difference here. We put ourselves at least in the middle of the pack of Seminole County policing organizations, and a 3% adjustment to the base pay of a deputy sheriff position would move the starting pay to deputy sheriff to $52,000, again, at market value for the position. 5% across the board with an opportunity to adjust for compression. So some of this money that's in there is, again, the 5% across the board with the adjustment for compression and the move to the base pay. At the request of commissioners, we put kind of a comparison chart in here, and I think that we're always incredibly mindful to keep our request under the growth of property taxes. And this chart indicates, since I've been sheriff, from the 17-18 fiscal year all the way through, what our requests have been. And again, all of you have been working with us year after year to ensure that we remain commensurate to market value, that we're rewarding the difficult job that our members of our organization, not just sworn members, by the way, certified and civilian members of the agency are there, and we're incredibly grateful for that. But you can see the budget growth compared to the role, and this request of 8% increase is, again, 16% under the growth from ad valorem. Of course, we're a crime-fighting organization, and as you can imagine, coming off of the COVID years, there's a significant adjustment when businesses are opening again. People are out there getting back into the community. But when you combine increase in mental health and unintended consequences of COVID, inevitably there's going to be a problem. So although there's a slight increase in crime year to year from last year to this year, when you look at a 5-year window, we're still incredibly low in reported crime, the lowest in the region, and lowest in state's history. But there again, as businesses become open, as new people find ways to victimize, you see various spikes. Some of it may be because of the mental health concerns that I laid out before. Other is associated with the unprecedented dependency and use of drugs that sometimes brings in promiscuous behavior and criminal activity. But to give a comparison, there's about $2.5 million of recovered property in 2022, and just shy of 5,000 arrests for the men and women of our agency. How our agency works, and I know you know a little bit about our organization, but we try to be as transparent as we can, and we know that there's people that are watching in and others that will watch this report back. When you look at this breakdown, this is where we stand. Of course, public is the most important part of what we do, and that way, that's one of the reasons why they appear at the very top of our organizational chart. And then one of the interesting things that you'll see as our divisions are separated, we actually have a majority of our executive staff that are actually civilian. 5 of the 8 members of our organization are actually civilian members that oversee various areas. When you look at this chart breakdown, we have, of course, a civilian general counsel, a civilian chief of staff, a civilian chief of administrative services, a civilian member of our Department of Corrections, and a civilian member of our family and youth services, as well as administrative services. So Again, that's just kind of a breakdown of where we go. And you'll see that theme kind of continuing through is if we can civilianize a position, it just makes good sense. Not only is it more cost-effective, I think that it brings a level of diversity to discussions and strategies and conversations when we talk about serving people.
Commissioners, the slide in front of you provides an overall budget summary. So this is all funds in. We changed this slide a little bit this year to try to, again, depict more our total all-in budget. And so you'll see our gross budget is $184,415,000, and that is broken down in between the general fund, which is at gross 173 million plus. But we also offset, and this is something we tried to show you this year, we offset our general fund revenue down to our certified budget ask of $165,878. That is offset by some general fund revenues that we take in, and we'll go over those in a little bit more detail in another slide. The column to the right of the general fund is the special revenue funds. These are all earmarked funds. They either come, and we'll go into detail on those, either come directly from county special revenue funds, or we manage special revenue funds where we have contracts, agreements, and grants that come directly into the sheriff as far as that agreement, and the board is not party to them. That number has significantly dropped this year, and that is in relation to the fact that we no longer will be moving forward with Child Protective Services with DCF. That contract alone was about $4.4 million. So in prior budgets, you'll see that number upward of 12 or 13 million. And then finally, to the right of that, per statute 30.49, and we'll talk about this again in detail on a slide coming up, we ask for all facility requests directly to you, and that is statutorily outside of the certified budget of the sheriff. So our ask is consistent with prior year asks at $2,975,000. So for our overall all-in budget, it's more reflective at the $184 million. Then again, we do take in revenues that we used to transfer over to the county, budget them, they transfer the money back. So this was just a more efficient way of doing it, and we agreed to do that with county staff back in fiscal year '21.
Next slide is the breakdown of those positions. I made mention that, an overwhelming percentage of our members are actually civilian. The breakdown of the 1,411 full-time members, which is a reduction from the number that we had last year, approximately 60 or so with the Child Protective Investigations. But you can see the breakdown of 460 sworn, and those are deputy sheriff or investigator positions, 228 certified, and certified are the ones that are working in various correctional facility capacities, the detention center or our county jail, and then, of course, 570 civilians. The part-time positions down at the bottom are largely our school crossing guards. That represent 153. There are a few others in there that are not school crossing guards, but an overwhelming majority of the part-time employees are our school crossing guards. The next breakdown is the legal aspect of what my responsibility as sheriff by Chapter 30.49. Hereby certified that the proposed expenditures for the fiscal year 23-24 are reasonable and necessary for the proper and efficient operation of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, and that is broken down between the law enforcement, correctional, and court services breakdown. And again, because it's reasonable and necessary, that's why we went back with the additional adjustment once we found the impact of 1.7% with the increased contribution to FRS. The breakdown of 8% is there, and that's kind of a reflection of year to year. And we always like to put this slide in here because of a good, solid, effective working relationship, one that we value tremendously. You trust us to provide a significant amount of services that normally would be vested with the county, specifically corrections, juvenile detention, probation, the pay program and youth alternatives. The breakdown is a 40-60 breakdown. It remains consistent with that. So on behalf of the county, we operate $67 million worth of services, broken down to those 4 particular areas: corrections, juvenile detention, probation, pay, and youth alternatives. And the other is responsibilities that are invested with me as sheriff, constitutional responsibilities.
This chart just shows the certification, again, broken down by law enforcement, corrections, and court services, which is our statutory obligation to be able to account for all of our expenditures in those 3 buckets. So that just shows you an overview and a breakdown from that view. Within the general fund revenues, which we talked about before, the top part of this chart is the revenues that basically are remitted to the county and into your general fund. So when Tim brought up the overall general fund of $300 million, those revenues, the $4,345,000, are included within your general fund. Those are mainly statutory fees, court fees. They're things that we don't really have any control or consistency over how they come in. At the bottom, however, is the detail of the ones that we net against our budget. They come into our office, we use them directly, and those are recorded on the sheriff's books. And those represent the school resource deputy contracts with Seminole County School Board, the dispatch contracts that we have with the municipalities for our countywide dispatch center. We have certain technology contracts. Those are with municipalities outside of Seminole County that utilize some of our systems, our criminal record system and also our CAD system. And then we have a monitoring system through the courts contract for domestic violence impact GPS monitoring, and that's the $117,000.
Next slide is just a breakdown of where our money is spent by category. Of course, inflation is affecting us all. Everything is up. I'll talk a little bit more about the costs that we have with inmate health care and food supply and the cost of vehicles and all of those things that, again, we're all experiencing that. But as you can see, a little more than 83% is personal services. Operating is 13%. Capital outlay is 3.5%. One of the things that I like to talk about here is, many would ask how we've been able to shift and focus on these most current pressing issues and trends. And one of the ways that we do it is our organization pivots and shifts. We see trends come and go. Some remain the same, but largely if we can move from something that is less of a problem today than it was a few years ago, we can move those resources down to tackle on other projects. By far, property crime and traffic enforcement and persons crimes always remain at the top of our list of providing public safety. And of course, now with mental health and substance abuse, goes into our fundamental philosophy that crime is a symptom of another problem. And if we can address issues during their infant stages, we have a greater successfulness of fixing those problems, not only for the individual in our community today, but generations of people to follow. Because if you're the son or daughter of somebody who's incarcerated or addicted to a substance, you are more than 13 times more likely to engage in maladaptive behavior yourself. So quite literally shifts the course for generations to follow and moves the burden off our tax dollars and lets people live and care for themselves.
This is the line item portion of our presentation. So I'm going to quickly go through some of these and just show you where our challenge areas are. Overall, in personal services, the sheriff already discussed the need to look at salaries, and we did budget at a 5% factor. However, if you really did the math on the $4.7 million change, you'll see it's more like 6-point-something%. Some of that is the compounding of the adjustments that we did last year and adjust for compression. So that overall factor there. So we are looking at a 5% adjustment plus compression adjustments. So some people will be receiving more than 5%, others will be receiving 5%. So that's how we're looking at salary adjustments. And then in the retirement area, we've discussed, we have Senate bill. I know that's a factor for the county, and you're well aware of that. For us overall, it was $4.3 million, almost $4.4 million. It does put us at a blended rate for contributions at about 25-point-something% overall with our special risk and civilian meshed together. Some good news, we have been very, very, very fortunate on our health insurance and overall insurance costs that we've been able to really hold the line, and that has helped our budget over the last 5 years, and that our insurance fund is doing very well. I do, as a professional that's been doing this for many, many years, I am kind of shocked and awe when I look at these numbers and look at pension costs being higher than healthcare costs. It's an interesting trend that is happening because that was never even closed for a long time. And then again, in workers' comp, we are with the Florida Sheriff's Association, manages a pooled fund with the sheriffs for workers' comp, and that fund has continued to do very well in the workers' comp area, so we have really no rate increase in that area.
Lisa, before we leave this slide, I just want to take just a moment to talk about overtime. You see, $6.5 million in overtime or something like that. Staffing still is an incredible challenge in this profession. Quite frankly, there is a void across the state of Florida when you look at the amount of people who are actually going through the academy and become qualified to work as policing professionals or corrections professionals. This is a strategy that we're working with our partners at Seminole State College to kind of rectify, do all that we can. But what's happening here is if it were not for state incentives to attract people from other states across the country to come to Florida, we would actually have a much larger problem than what we have. The greatest effects in the staffing and overtime for various positions come really in the form of corrections and communications, when once upon a time, you could interview 100 people for 10 deputy sheriff positions, and you'd have probably 25 or 30 people that were solid people worthy of employment that you would just want to hire. You could offer the position to 10, but you could offer an opportunity to join our organization to everyone else that you wanted to bring in by attracting them to corrections and communications. Now, that no longer exists. If somebody is wanting to be a police officer and they come and they interview and you tell them no, they probably have little attraction to take another or different type of job. They'll just go up the road 15 miles and apply at the next police department, and they're going to get hired. So, again, a lot of vacancies in corrections. I think we have 30 or so vacancies in corrections. We always struggle a little bit in our communication center doing combined communication with vacancies, and sometimes it's overtime that keeps us at the minimum staffing levels to keep the operation running.
And Sheriff, on that note, I'll go ahead and explain a little bit about how we budget there, just so you know we're not duplicating. And if you look at our actuals on overtime, they will be much higher than that because of what Sheriff Lima just explained. If we have vacancies, we're running overtime. So that basically the lap salary dollars that are budgeted up in our salaries and wages does cover the overtime that will incur on an actual basis as a result of those vacancies. And then finally, in the overtime amount, for a 24/7 public safety operation, we actually are extremely low if you compare to other agencies, in that we're under 10%. And some of that is actually built into normal schedules when it's a civilian employee that you're paying on a 40-hour basis and they're doing 12-hour shift work. So we actually are really good as far as overtime if you do some comparisons to other agencies.
And then later in the presentation, we'll lay out some different revenue sources based on divisions and partnerships we have with federal agencies and other stuff.
So on the line item presentation for operating expenditures, this spans 2 different slides here. I'm going to touch on the highlights of some of the challenges that we've had, but I also want to tell you at the beginning that in the 22-23 fiscal year, we had the $750,000 budgeted for Child Protective Services. When we started to supplement Child Protective Services, and in '23 we officially budgeted $750,000, we chose to go ahead and utilize the state agreement for salaries and wages for personal services, and we started to pay for anything that was operating or capital out of our core budget. So the general fund, the $750,000, were in those line items. They were spread across various line items. So it could be for communication services. On the next slide, you'll see operating supplies, fuel, car leases, et cetera. So when we reduced it this year, and you look at the change in these line items across the 2 slides, it's kind of a false positive, and I'll show you on the next slide what I'm talking about, because we're reducing the CPS amount and then we're increasing what we need, so it kind of offsets some of those increases. So the $500,000 that the sheriff spoke of, we now have it in this budget in the contractual services line. You do see it sticking out as the change, and that is the change, the $500,000 for DCF. But that's not a new ask, because again, we've reduced these other lines. So we've really had higher increases in these other lines than it appears on this schedule because of that shift of that $750,000. On the top line, before I go to the next slide, professional services, the $998,000 is really about $1 million increase in the costs of inmate medical services. We were experiencing a lot of the increases in all of these lines over the last 2 fiscal years. We started to experience it in '22, then in '23 we really saw, medical's really holding there. Some of those increases we didn't budget because we were still trying to see if it was supply chain issues on the supply sides or if it was reality. And even the cost of some of the professional services, like our nursing contracts, we weren't sure if that was going to hold true. It has. So now we're factoring that in. So this isn't something we just experienced this past year. It has been kind of in the making over the last couple years. If you move to the next slide, Sheriff. Do you have the change?
I switched.
Oh, sorry. On the insurance line, this will be a good example. It looks as if our insurance costs are flat. This is where our liability insurance is, our auto insurance, a lot of other insurances that we carry on our aviation unit, et cetera. We really did experience about a 5.5% to 6% increase in our liability and auto insurance. It's not really showing up there because we also removed the CPS portion of liability and car insurance. So you'd really probably see more about a $175,000 to $200,000 increase there if it hadn't been for removing that CPS amounts, if that makes sense. And then down in operating supplies, same thing. We've got an increase there. However, you would see a much higher increase. Many of our operating supplies have held true. It wasn't just a supply chain thing. We have experienced anywhere from 15 to mainly 20 to 25% increases in most of the supplies, and a lot of that is within the jail, within our inmate area. On capital, the increase there is across the board on anything that we're buying, but specifically, we've had a significant increase, 26.5%, on our outfitted police vehicles, our marked vehicles. They have gone from 41,600 in 2021 when we purchased them to 52,600 currently when we just ordered. So that's going to be something that is permanent. Again, we're all experiencing that. I know you're seeing it too, but that kind of shows you where our increases are from. On the reserve for contingency, we're asking that that be increased. That 160,000, I think I've explained in the past, has been here since I've been at the county. So it's a significant amount of time, 20 years or more. I don't know where it came from originally. This past hurricane, Hurricane Ian, we had a good basis to say, you know what do we incur when we have one of these storms and we need to be out in the public and we need to do what we need to do? And it was about $350,000. What this does for us is it allows us to carry a contingency so that we always have to kind of be cognizant of when we get to September. If a hurricane comes in the last couple weeks, I have to be able to make payroll, and we have to be able to cash flow it. So we don't have a reserve that we can pull from for cash flow. So this is our reserve. So that helps us to be able to go forward and order capital and things like that and not be worried about whether we're going to incur hurricane expense that then would be reimbursed in the following fiscal year by FEMA. So that's a cash flow thing. So we're asking that that be adjusted. The next slide is our separated out request for facilities costs. County has been very gracious in that every year you have been allowing us to look at critical capital improvements at $975,000 in funding. This year we are asking that that be allocated to the expansion of our communications center. That project we started funding some time ago, back in fiscal year 17. We did some design and engineering. It was all ready to go, and then COVID hit, so it was delayed. We now have bid out the project. It has been awarded, and the contractor is ready to go. They will start work this summer and hope to finish early in the new year, if not by the new year. It's a very complex project. It'll involve county staff too, because it involves the 911 system. It involves your Motorola equipment within the center. Allocating the $975,000 will allow us to complete the project. That will include furnishing the center with all new furnishings too. And that furniture is original from the building, which was 1998, and is in desperate need of replacing. And it'll also allow us to configure the center better, more efficiently by replacing that. Additionally, for facilities, we do have a lot of other projects that you have allocated in the past off of the $975,000. And last year, as part of that, you allowed us to hire on some assistants to oversee those projects and get them done. They had all been held up from COVID, most of them in the jail. Those are all moving forward now, and we're hoping to really complete most of them by the end of this calendar year. So we can give you an updated status on that if needed. Now we're getting into our special revenue funds, and as you all know, you have many of those at the county. They're established to account for proceeds that are specifically earmarked revenue. Again, we have removed Child Protective Services. We also removed from the budget the 61 positions that program used to fund. Go to the next slide. Maybe not. You can see that we have removed the $4.8 million for Child Protective Services. If we enter into the MOU that we're requesting, we would then modify that zero amount to the $500,000 that will be coming into us to fund those 8 positions from DCF. The American Rescue Plan is the $9 million. This is the third year of the $9 million. We were slow to start spending that because we had vacancies and getting staffing up in play, but now we are moving forward with that. And as the sheriff mentioned earlier, we are finalizing the design of the new Hope and Healing Center. And once we have those numbers, we'll be able to come back and talk with the commission and talk about what we're doing to do the leasehold improvements that are necessary to that facility to get Advent up and running within the facility. Some good news here. If you look down at the Coverdell Forensics Science Improvement Grant, that is about $500,000 that was awarded to us from DOJ. It will completely replace, we didn't really have a fully functioning system within our forensics division to be able to do evidence and laboratory management along with our case system. So we were awarded that. That's a 3-year grant. It'll fully cover the cost of that system. And the system that we're going to be able to put in is the same system that FDLE works with, which will help efficiencies between the two systems and between the two agencies. In addition, something that's not on here that I'll note, which is good news, is we also were awarded about $380,000 from the state that will fully replace our jail management system. So our current jail management system is written in-house. We are finding it's a great system, but we're finding that it's very hard to hire and have staff to maintain these systems. So what we're doing is we basically zeroed in on the systems that we want to continue to do in-house, which is our CAFE reporting system and also our CAD system, but we're trying to substitute package systems in other areas that can integrate with those systems. So we were awarded $380,000 that will replace our jail management system, and that will actually be put in this summer. So that's why it's not reflected within this budget. In
Lisa,
addition, we have three.
If I could just, we've got 20 minutes until we hit 11 o'clock, so I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I don't know if there's some
Perfect.
highlights, just for gauging time.
Okay, perfect. From the Florida legislative session, we had 3 appropriations. If approved by the governor, we have $500,000 that's not reflected on here for the Hope and Healing Center. That'll go to services that Advent Health is providing. We have $500,000 allocated to a mobile command vehicle. The vehicle itself will cost about $1 million. We're hoping that at the end of this year, we may have some savings. We'll see with the FRS changes and some of our health care challenges. But hopefully we'll be able to allocate some of our savings to be able to do that match. In addition, in the legislative session, we have $300,000 that was appropriated toward our CAD system. And what that will do is we had a project that we rewrote our CAD system. This will actually supply some of the updated equipment in the center and for that system to do some of the enhancements that are included in that system. This slide is from funding from the county's special revenue funds. I don't think that there's anything really new that we need to talk about there.
Okay, so I'll pick up the pace just a little bit as we go through, kind of give you kind of a landscape of what our operation looks like. I mean, we have 3 nonprofit organizations. If you include the Police Athletic League, we have a community foundation. All of you are familiar. This is what Shop at the Sheriff, Christmas Village, Halloween Spooktacular. It's things that we partner with our various organizations. The professionalism of the organization is top-notch. We are one of the most accredited policing organizations, correction organizations in the state of Florida, with 8 various accreditations. That's 2 law enforcement, both state and national, 2 corrections, both state and national. And then we have our forensics lab, we have our aviation, we have our medical section, and our communications section that is represented there. They come in and conduct independent audits typically. Well, we talked a little bit about the Office of Sheriff, and one of the things that I highlighted earlier in the presentation is that out of the 11 positions that we have in the executive office of the Office of Sheriff, 8 are civilian and 3 are sworn. Total breakdown of the numbers that work in my office there. General Counsel has 5 positions, and there's a lot of work that they have going on there because they also assist with the municipalities on certain requests they have if they don't have an attorney specific to policing or corrections type of work. Professional development, you see we have 18 full-time members, 11 of them are sworn. This is the training department that helps recertify, make sure that everyone stays proficient, and what they do extends well beyond the traditional drive, fight, and shoot expectations of a policing and corrections organization. Professional standards, again, keeps up with those changes in policy. They make sure that everyone remains credentialed. Public Affairs is our external reaching organization. There's 8 civilians and 1 part-time person that works in there. And this is one of the examples of trying to civilianize as many positions as you possibly can. This looks very much like a sworn position in many organizations across the country. Fiscal Services, 23 people. There's some offsetting budget there when it comes to the Inmate Welfare Fund. The American Rescue, HIDA, is offsetting that by about $250,000. You'll see down little boxes on some of these slides of costs that's offset, but that's offset again by Inmate Welfare Fund, the American Rescue Relief, and then HIDA, the high-intensity drug trafficking effort throughout the region, which we do most of the financials for them. Fleet and Building Services, this is broken down in 2 separate slides. This is Building Services with 14 civilian members that work within the area, and the budget and the breakdown with the expenses is listed there. And then, of course, the second slide here with Fleet and Building is the Fleet Services, where there's a total of 7 full-time members, all civilian, and the breakdown of the costs associated with them. We talked about human resources and recruitment. Just spend a moment, because this area has not grown much, and the needs and demands have probably increased 5-fold. A lot of people coming in, a lot of people going out, but yet the human resources and recruitment effort, the demands of those positions continue to increase. So there's 25 total people, 22 full-time, and then 3 part-time, all civilian. Technology, we have incredibly talented people that are there. Their budget is offset by, again, $250,000 in special revenues with contracts with outside city agencies, including outside agencies of Seminole County with Winter Park, Maitland, Apopka, Eatonville, and Ocoee, who benefits from some of the technology that we put in place. That's where that $250,000 is offset. Some of the most visible aspect of our organization is the people who wear uniforms just like mine. They drive green and white patrol cars with big blue lights on. There's a total of 219 full-time positions, 2 part-time, and of course 198 of those positions, because they are deputy sheriffs, are sworn. Communications, we have consolidated communications, which just simply makes sense. All the municipalities are a part of that, and that is offset about $3.6 million. And of course, that comes in through 911 fees and the contracts we have with the various municipalities to provide those dispatching services for them. Special operations is a service that we provide throughout Seminole County. There's 23 full-time positions in there. 20 of them are sworn. These are the aviation, search and rescue team, the traditional range and water, or people who are out on airboats working. Again, the aviation section, department, all of that, and our new helicopters already paid for. And then that $350,000, and every time we have to have this service, that capital outlay is for the reconditioning of the engine on the helicopters that are required at certain intervals. Diversified Investigative Services, we call it DIS. This is our detective shop. You can see that there is 20 full-time people in there, 20 sworn. These are all the people that are working major crimes, digital forensics, economic crimes, the cold case file. Some of that budget is offset with $45,000 from our federal agencies, largely to cover the overtime expenses on what we call TFOs, task force members, and other efforts that are going on within that area. Forensic services, quite literally, we have PH doctors that are working within this area. They have expertise and various forensic assignments, from latent and patent fingerprints to shoe impressions and all of that. All of them are civilian members, 19 people that work within that area, and they assist countywide services when our municipalities should need that assistance. Domestic Security Division, 38 full-time members, 14 of them are civilian. Most of the civilian are crime analysts that are doing data collection and putting our sworn people in the right place at the right time based on crime patterns. Some of that $225,000 is offset with our domestic violence and GPS grants throughout the state. And then, of course, federal overtime again, and that's with the FBI, U.S. Marshals Task Force, and a unique partnership with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement as well for domestic security. Drug Enforcement and Behavioral Services, this is what you know to be CCIB, and they're responsible for a large amount of the new initiatives that we're working on. A total of 35 people that are in that area. 27 of those people are sworn. 8 are actually civilian, and that budget is offset by a little over than $1 million from ARPA funds, HIDA task force, again, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Association, and of course the federal agencies, particularly DEA and other federal components that are there. School safety, we continue to experience this unique partnership with Seminole County Public Schools, dedicated professionally trained police officer or deputy sheriff on every single public school campus. The director of school safety and security, based upon the relationship, is still a captain within the organization, and we continue to address and combat some of the challenges that we have with our kids, right? If the increase in Baker Acts with children and the unintended consequences of social behavior, this all plays out, not just in our schools, but in our community. And I think sometimes it's most visible in schools when you take 70,000 kids, put them all in one environment at a particular time at a location, it stands out. But these challenges that we have with our kids are just not unique to what's going on campuses. These are what's happening in our communities and all of that, and that's reflective of the 30% overall Baker Acts are kids. But a whole total of 198 positions there, 60 are sworn, and the 134 part-time are the school crossing guards. The $4 million that's offset with that is that unique 50-50 funding relationship with Seminole County Public Schools. So I think it's $3,900,000 or so that's there. Family Services Division, 22 full-time people, 1 part-time person, 16 sworn, 6 civilian. The sworn are the people who are doing criminal investigations on child protective investigations, exploit, neglect, abandonment. They're actually detectives working in that area. That is offset by just shy of $400,000 with the Violence Against Women grant and VOCA for victim advocates. Juvenile Justice is largely our juvenile detention center that's unique to Seminole County, Juvenile Assessment Center, Juvenile Enforcement Center. You can see the breakdown that's there of total of 113 full-time, 2 part-time positions, total of 115. And that's offset about $1.5 million through the FBI Child Exploitation Grant, the contract with DJJ, Florida Network. We're the only policing organization in the state of Florida that does the SNAP program, Stop Now, and kind of think and prepare to kind of think through. We're looking to expand that. And of course, we have teen court that's there as well. Probation and rehabilitative services. I've shared with you in the past that, you know, the work that's going on inside of the correctional facility is nothing short of remarkable. I think it's a general expectation of our citizens that if somebody breaks into a car, commits a crime, that we will do all that we can to fix that behavior during the time that somebody's incarcerated. And when you're in jail or in a correctional facility, that's the time that you get off drugs, you find God, and you want to steer your life in the right direction, and we're trying to capitalize on that. All of these folks that are working in that position are all civilian. Many of those probation officers worked at the county at one time and then transitioned over to us to be that continuous continuity of supervision, both on the streets, in the facilities, and when they're released out on probation. Corrections and security operations, these are the uniform-wearing members of corrections. That's why you'll see a total full-time 231 people that are there. You'll see 164 of them are actually certified, and that's a certified correctional officer, 66 civilian. A lot of the programming positions on the inside are civilian positions, and then one sworn member that's over there helping connect the dots between services that are on the outside, mental health services, and et cetera. Corrections intake release programs, there is a total of 65 people. 24 civilian, 40 certified, and again, one sworn that are there working in those various programs. Health services, again, a breakdown of all 44. We run our own medical facility, medical doctor, nursing staff. We're doing cognitive therapy, all of the MAT. The $271,000 that's offset in special revenue is the FADA, the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association grant that we have to help offset some of the cost of medical-assisted, medical-based treatment therapy. Judicial services are providing safety and security to our 3 courthouses as a constitutional responsibility. I'm charged with providing security to the judiciary and each individual judge. And again, in addition to that, as you know, we've expanded that to our public safety building at main headquarters and the county services building here with our deputies that are in the back and that are here to make sure that we have a safe and secure area. So again, just in summary, and then I'll wrap it up. You have everything. It's an 8% increase. You know, a lot of that is the work with the CPS transition. You know, we have the $500,000, which is a reduction from the $750,000. Lisa already told you the cost of inmate health care is up. We have a strategy moving forward to combat that with our partnership with True Health. Other organizations like Advent Health are helping that area as well. Of course, in the correctional facility, the cost of food and meals up. This adjustment of 8% includes a 5% adjustment across the board, which is pretty consistent to what the state is doing, and a 3% adjustment to the base pay, and an adjustment for compression across the board. And with that, we'll pause for questions, just shy of 11 o'clock. Sorry.
You did great. You did great. I'll tell you, you do such an incredible job of being transparent and giving us detail that no one is ever going to fault you for, well, he didn't say anything about whatever. So Commissioner Zenbauer has already asked to have time for a question. And
Quite
then
efficient in
anyone else.
consuming the time that lacks any additional inquiry, but I don't know that it needs a whole lot, so thank you very much. This is maybe for staff. We had a discussion not long ago, and while the sheriff's here to inquire with the sheriff, I think we should be collaborating, including the sheriff, on discussion of what we do with the opioid settlement funding as far as some possible direct nexus for some of the programs that are currently being put on by the sheriff's office and that we have funded with the Hope and Healing Center. So from the sheriff's perspective, is that something your staff can collaborate with our staff, and if there's a will amongst this board to do something along those lines, find creative ways to do that with arguably proceeds that are directly related to the sheriff's work?
Yeah, I think that is incredibly important, and we all trust the direction of the board. I mean, you guys have the right mindset, the right heart. I think that the most important thing for us to do is make sure that the funding sources are used for what its intended purpose was, right? You have the state lawsuit, that money is coming now from the state. You have the multiple district lawsuit. And what I like to say, and I think is important for all of us to say, that the work that we do, we're doing on your behalf. We're doing it on behalf of the citizens of Seminole County, and I think that sometimes people look and say, well, here's what the sheriff's doing, the sheriff's office is doing. This is unique because this is what we're doing. this is what we're doing together in the community. And I think that there may be some opportunities to offset some of the line item budgets without, violating any rules with supplanting. But I think that when you look at the true purpose of what this settlement money is for, it's some of the services that we're providing already. And I know that we're incredibly excited about sitting down and having some conversations about what makes sense and what works.
Great. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hurd.
I will be really fast. I appreciate the fact that you've created an environment, even in transitioning Child Protective Services back to the state, of creating no gap. And filling that gap is what we're here to do. I think tying into Commissioner Zimbauer's comments, as ARPA goes away, the settlement may phase in, and it would be really nice not to have us create a gap or create an additional funding need out of general revenue. I applaud the wellness effort that's keeping your health insurance low. And I applaud the idea that you're moving from creating your own software in the areas where you can do that to externalizing it because of the new hiring restrictions that we're seeing in the information technology areas. So I think that's forward-leading and a really good example. Always appreciate your presentations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner DeLaurie?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sheriff, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank your entire staff, because we all know that there's a lot of people with you that share the same drive and leadership. I want to thank them all. I've had several conversations with you regarding children's services, and I know that's been an ongoing change because of the state, so I want to thank you for your leadership with that. And I know there's going to be some more changes as it moves forward until that all settles out, so thank you. I would like to have some conversation, if you don't mind. I saw one of your slides. Well, first of all, your slide that shows a 60-40 split, I think is very, community needs to know about the partnership we have with the Sheriff's Department. That 40% that you do for the county, it's the right way to run the county, it's the right way to run the Sheriff's Department. I mean, who better to run the jail than the sheriff? Who better to run the probation than the sheriff? And it just goes on and on. I'm not going to repeat them all because of time here. So I want to thank your willingness and your leadership to do that. Even though it does inflate your budget, it's services that you're providing us that we wouldn't have to provide, so thank you. That's all right. That's all right. Excuse me. I would like to have some conversation on one of your slides that talks about the BCC facilities. I know the jail is the BCC facilities, and I know that there's some money that we have to spend each year to keep that building operational. At some point, we need to be looking at renovating that building holistically, and I want to make sure that we're doing that on a timely fashion. In the conversation that I've had with you and your staff and your leadership, if it is renovated on a timely fashion, we could save with staff, which could help offset some of your costs, which helps offset our costs. I want to make sure that we're looking at that. And I'm rounding numbers to $3 million for the BCC facilities. What does that include?
So $2 million of that is just annual maintenance within the jail.
Okay.
It also includes largely utilities. I don't have the breakdown, but a large amount of that is utilities.
Ms. Briggs,
But this is the ongoing internal toilets plugged.
And that's the reason I'm bringing it up, because the amount of money we're spending on putting a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid, at some point we need to rip the Band-Aid off and actually renovate it. So we not only save on the ongoing maintenance, but actually save on the staffing as well.
Okay. And one of the things that you funded for us last year within this 975 was a study of the jail that is currently ongoing, an assessment. And I've already spoke with the new county manager and Lori, and we've talked about the fact that that'll be done this summer. And once that's done, we'll share that and talk with county staff about what that study says.
I'm just trying to set the stage for that, because we've had that conversation, Ms. Briggs, as well as with the sheriff. And then last, I know that you all gave me a tour once of the evidence area, and to say that it's full, to say that it's busting at the seams is an understatement, so I think something needs to be done effectively for that, for the expansion of it, so that it can be run most effectively. And I do appreciate all you do for the school safety offices. Whatever we can do to increase that, please let us know. And most importantly, it's all about keeping the citizens in this county safe, so thank you for your leadership and everything you do for us, including your staff. That's the end of my comments.
Commissioner Constantine?
Well, the hard 11 has already been breached, so I'm just going to say, Sheriff, you and I have had some very serious conversations about your budget already, and specifically about the $4 million that's already been brought up with the opioid settlement. So we'll continue those conversations, and also, working with the staff. So thank you.
Anything else?
If I could just wrap up real quickly, as I want to thank Mary Hope and her team. She's usually here with us, but she put a lot of work into the effort, and usually she joins us. She wasn't able to join us today. I want to thank Lisa and her entire team. I also want to thank all of you, because I am so incredibly proud to raise a family in Seminole County with your leadership, your collaboration, your trust. When I see this moving trend across the country where people are afraid to support their policing professionals, you not only proclaim that policing is such a significant part of our overall governance of a community, you back and you support the men and women that are out there on the front lines, and for that, I'm incredibly grateful for your service and your partnership.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you and your entire team. We'll break until 2 o'clock. Thank you.